Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. A lot of it breaking now. Coming up, 3:30, Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, with a follow-up to the questions we've had on this airway about which banks have banished a Trump attorney by the name of John Eastman. We've got an update to that story coming up from Reagan Reese. Then, 4:30, Stephen Son, former police chief for the United States Capitol Police, will be here as we talk about big testimony today. Members of the National Guard revealing the truth about the events of January 6th. You don't want to miss that. And Joe DeGenova is here at 5 o'clock. We talked to him, the former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, about all of these dangerous, tyrannical legal efforts to try and destroy Donald Trump and his voters. Joe joins us at 5, and you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Always grateful for your contributions. An impeachment trial, at least for the moment, is the topic of conversation in the United States Senate today. Chuck Schumer, a short while ago, began the process of trying to dismiss the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, the DHS Secretary. He'd like to get rid of this as quickly as possible. There are a couple of procedural hurdles to doing that, so the expectation is that this could maybe take a few hours. We'll see. The state of play is this. Just a few minutes ago, Senator John Kennedy, obviously a Republican, raised the idea that the Senate just adjourn for today the impeachment trial and pick it back up on April 30th at noon. He said, just give it a few weeks. We'll come back on April 30th at noon. That'll give us time to talk about all of this because they're not allowed to engage in any meaningful floor debate while they're in the midst of this impeachment process. There are rules to the impeachment that preclude the senators from doing that. But there are some speeches being given by a variety of senators about the merits of what they're up to at the moment. And among them, Senator Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, just spoke a moment ago and said, hey, don't dismiss this thing. In fact, we have an obligation to hear the facts. Here is Mitch McConnell just moments ago.
Leaders recognized.
The Senate just swore an oath to do impartial justice according to the Constitution and the laws of our country. Normal work. As a court of impeachment, we're called not to speak, not to debate, but to listen, both to the case against the accused and to his defense. At this point, in any trial in the country, the prosecution presents the evidence of the case, counsel for the defense does the same, and the jury remains silent as it listens. This is what our rules require of us as well. But the Senate has not had the opportunity to perform this duty. The Senate will not hear the House managers present the details of their case against Secretary Mayorkas, that he willingly neglected the duties of his office and that he lied to Congress about the extent of that failure. Likewise, we will not hear the Secretary's representatives present the vigorous defense to which he's entitled.
Vigorous.
Our colleagues know that we are obligated to take these proceedings seriously. This is what our oath prescribes. It's what the history and precedent require. And I would urge each of our colleagues to consider that this is what the framers actually envisioned. The power of impeachment is one of the most delicate balances our constitutional system strikes with a portion of the American people's sovereign electoral authority. It purchases a safeguard against malpractice, and it gives the Senate the power and the duty to decide. This process must not be abused. It must not be short-circuited. History will not judge this moment well. Therefore, I move to table the point of order and ask for the yeas and nays.
All right, and the votes go on after that. So there's Mitch McConnell today arguing, as you might expect, that this trial should continue. And quite obviously it should. In the end, if Republicans figure out a way to prevail here, which I don't expect they will, to actually get a trial underway, it would be to the benefit of the American people. They get a chance to see what Alejandro Mayorkas has truly done, and by extension Joe Biden, to betray them and their borders. You don't have a country if you don't have borders. And, of course, Alejandro Mayorkas has been working like crazy to diminish our status as a country. So he deserves this, big time. And the American people deserve a full hearing on this subject. Democrats are working to make sure you don't get that. They want to censor that hearing. Of course, they're perfectly happy introducing frivolous impeachments. They love those. They introduced 2 of them against Trump. 2 of them. But a legitimate impeachment of an official who truly deserves it, they need to stop it because he's on their side and he's advancing their goals. It's also shameful. Speaking of the Trump impeachment, the first one, the Ukraine one, there's a great report today out of Real Clear Politics. Paul Sperry with that. Do you remember the name Eric Ciaramella? Remember that name? Did that ever come up for you? The whistleblower, the guy who was the one who said that Trump shouldn't be allowed to say that on the phone. Trump's quid pro quo, all of this stuff, that all came from this whistleblower, Eric Ciaramella. Paul Sperry has an important report on this subject today. He says the whistleblower who sparked Donald Trump's first impeachment was, you ready for this, deeply involved in the political maneuverings behind Biden family business schemes in Ukraine. Now, of course you're ready for it. This is the way this always goes down. Those very schemes that Trump wanted probed, newly obtained emails from former Vice President Joe Biden's office reveal. In 2019, then National Intelligence Council analyst Eric Ciaramella touched off a political firestorm when he anonymously accused Trump of linking military aid for Ukraine to a demand for an investigation into alleged Biden corruption in that country. But 4 years earlier, while he was working as a national security analyst attached to then Vice President Joe Biden's office, Ciaramella was a close advisor when Biden threatened to cut off U.S. aid to Ukraine unless it fired its top prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, who was investigating Ukraine-based Burisma Holdings. At the time, the corruption-riddled energy giant was paying Biden's son, Hunter, millions of dollars. Those payments, along with other evidence tying Joe Biden to his family's business dealings, received little attention in 2019 as Ciaramella accused Trump of a corrupt quid pro quo. Neither did subsequent evidence indicating that Hunter Biden's associates had identified Shokin as a, quote, key target. These matters are now part of the House impeachment inquiry into President Biden. There's a quote here from George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. He says, quote, "It now seems there was material evidence that would have been used at the impeachment trial to exonerate Trump. Trump was alleging there was a conflict of interest with the Bidens, and the evidence could have challenged Biden's account and established his son's interest in the Shokin firing." Ciaramella's role, including high-level discussions with top Biden aides and Ukrainian prosecutors, is only now coming to light thanks to the recent release of White House emails and photos from the National Archives. Isn't it amazing? How long ago was that impeachment? 2019? 2009. So 5 years ago is when this entire stupid saga was kicked off, as the left looked to throw Trump out of office for rightly investigating Joe Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. They tried to kick him out of office. Have you noticed there is no similar impeachment right now for Joe Biden as he tries to imprison his political opponent? So Trump asks legitimate questions about corruption, impeach. Biden attempts to throw his political opponent in jail, he's upholding the law. That's the framework we're given by the broad media, of course, and all these Democrats who have power. So Ciaramella, in these emails, the emails show Ciaramella expressed shock. Quote, "Yikes," is what he wrote, at Biden's move to withhold the $1 billion in aid from Kiev, which represented a sudden shift in U.S. policy. They also show he was drawn into White House communications over how to control adverse publicity from Hunter taking a lucrative seat on Burisma's board. So Ciaramella knew. He knew that there was a radical policy shift, that Joe Biden was responsible for it, and that Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma, and it was creating a massive publicity problem for the Obama White House. He was at the center of all of it. And he's the one who turns around and says, Donald Trump's the dirty one for noticing all of this. Did this come up? No, never came up in the impeachment. Never. In fact, the media more broadly, to this day, most of them have never said the name Eric Ciaramella. They've never even admitted that this guy's the whistleblower. Paul Sperry writes, there's no evidence that Ciaramella raised alarms about the questionable Biden business activities that he witnessed firsthand, which is in sharp contrast to 2019. In that instance, he was galvanized into action after being told by White House colleague Alexander Vindman of a, quote, improper phone call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. During the call, Trump solicited Zelensky's help in investigating Burisma and Hunter Biden's role in the company. Some former congressional investigators say that Ciaramella effectively helped cover up a scandal far worse than what Trump was impeached over. What's more, he failed to disclose that he had a potential conflict of interest stemming from his connection to the matter Trump asked Zelensky to probe when he lodged his complaint against Trump. Real Clear Investigations was the first to identify then 33-year-old Ciaramella as the anonymous impeachment whistleblower, something major media continue to keep under tight wraps. I'll end my reading of this excellent Paul Sperry report on this last paragraph, but listen to this. Ciaramella worked under CIA Director John Brennan. These villains keep popping up. The CIA director who spied on the United States Senate, then lied about it. Ciaramella worked under CIA Director John Brennan when President Obama made Biden his point man on Ukraine in 2014. That's the same year Burisma hired Hunter. The next year, the CIA detailed Ciaramella, a longtime advocate for aid to Ukraine, to the White House, where he worked closely with Biden and his staff as a top advisor on key Ukrainian policies. After Biden left office, he stayed on at the GOP White House, Trump, until mid-2017, even though he's a Democrat, working as a Ukrainian and Russian analyst on Trump's National Security Council. Co-workers there accused him of trying to sabotage Trump, including allegedly leaking sensitive information to the press. That was in the few short months he worked there, that he was trying to, quote, sabotage Trump and was allegedly leaking sensitive information to the press in an effort to undermine the Trump presidency and, by extension, of course, the American people who had placed Trump in office in the first place. How frequently have we heard versions of this story? So this is all very useful information. This is the kind of thing that would have been, well, much more useful back in 2019, as the left was moving to, and successfully did, impeach Donald Trump, the president of the United States. He would go on to be acquitted in the United States Senate, as you know. But the basis of it was a Biden hatchet man starting the entire thing. Eric Ciaramella, according to Real Clear Investigations today. Paul Sperry's excellent work continues. Yeah, in fact, these comparisons between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, well, they got a hearing today in the Oversight Committee. This is a bit unusual, where you had two members going directly at one another, Democrat Jamie Raskin and Oversight Chairman James Comer today, talking about what kind of business Biden and Trump are in, respectively. That's a hilarious conversation to have. And, of course, in every sense, Trump would have the upper hand of having a legitimate business. What kind of business do the Bidens do exactly? Well, that's a great question. Here's James Comer asking Jamie Raskin today.
I will tell you this. If you believe that it would have been illegal for Joe Biden to take $5 million from Ukraine, it certainly would have been. What do you think about Donald Trump taking more than $5 million from the Chinese government while he was president?
Well, we know that Donald Trump had a legitimate business that he talked about and he campaiged on.
The legitimate business was the White House.
What business?
He sold the White House.
Oh, give me a break.
What
business was what business were the Bidens in? Well, what business did Joe Biden's family own? What business were they in? Did they have hotels? Did they have a social media company? Did they have golf courses? Did they have casinos? Did they have office
Mr.
buildings?
Chairman.
What business?
Raskin has no answers. He just tries to move on, which is hilarious. But this is perfect and succinct. And please, for the love of God, can more Republicans just be as plain spoken with each passing day as Comer was just now? What business are the Bidens in? Why are they being paid millions of dollars? And the idea, like, hear Raskin say, oh, Trump made all this money from China. Let's break down the truth of all of this. To the extent that the Trump businesses received money from any foreign entities while Trump was president of the United States, do you remember the pains that the Trump organization went to straight up donate the money that they were receiving at the Trump Hotel here in Washington, D.C. to the United States Treasury? If they established that they had a foreign client in the hotel, they were turning around and donating the money to the United States Treasury. So they were on the up and up with how they handled all of this. They were trying to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest, and they are entitled as a business to take a profit from whoever rents a hotel room, no matter what country they come from. But they went above and beyond their obligations, and they said, no, in fact, we'll donate the proceeds. Okay? And then Trump himself, what did he do with his income from the United States government? What is the president paid? It's like over $400,000 a year. He donated every last cent to various agencies inside of the United States government. In fact, they had quarterly ceremonies where they'd come out and they'd announce, here's where Trump is donating his entire paycheck this quarter. They kept doing it over and over and over again. Finally, in terms of his enrichment, this idea that he somehow profited off of being president of the United States, every available measure that we look at when we say how net worth went, he lost net worth while he was president of the United States. He lost. It's not an advantageous position for this guy. And that's just the truth. That's just the truth. Meanwhile, everybody else in Washington gets filthy rich. Nancy Pelosi is absurdly rich now. And the same is true. Barack Obama comes into office. He leaves a cajillionaire. How does that happen? Joe Biden, who for years pretended to be impoverished. Oh, poor Biden. Now he's worth many millions of dollars. Where's all this money coming from? Trump loses money, and then Democrats turn around and accuse him of being corrupt. This is the kind of ridiculous projection we've all been subjected to over and over and over again. Now, in the ongoing fact-finding mission that is the Vince Coglianese Show, we bring you more updates on one of Trump's attorneys, John Eastman, a favorite target of the American left, and now major banking institutions have gone to war against him as well. Reagan Reese from the Daily Caller with all of the latest headlines there. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 4:30, former U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund is here in attendance at an important hearing today detailing the National Guard's role in January 6th of 2021. Not what the left has been telling you at all. Chief Sund will be with us to discuss. Joe DeGenova is here at 5 o'clock, former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. We talk about all of the lawfare being waged right now to prevent the American people from voting for Trump. That's what's happening. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A short while ago, we had on our program here from Newsweek, Josh Hammer. He stopped by, and during our conversation, he raised a detail that up until that point I had been unaware of, which is a former Trump attorney by the name of John Eastman, who was giving Donald Trump legal advice in the wake of the 2020 election. Well, Eastman has come in for a lot of scrutiny and attacks by the American left. They want to destroy this guy for giving Trump any legal advice whatsoever, and there's been all sorts of efforts to disbar him and hurt him across the country, and apparently also efforts to debank him, to remove his status as an account holder at several banks. Josh Hammer raised this, and two banks stood out. He said Bank of America and USAA. That would be the bank that most of us think as the military bank for veterans and their families, and that jarred me. So we began the process of reaching out, saying, what's going on here? Is this true? The woman who did the reporting on this story and now has the results from it is Reagan Reese. She's a White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, where I'm also an editor, and she joins us now. Reagan, thank you so much for your time. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Okay, so what did you find? You started, as I mentioned, Bank of America and USAA. So you began digging on this question, and what were the results of your request?
Yeah, so I actually was able to get a hold of John Eastman and talk about this with him, and he explained to me that he was debanked twice in the span of 2 months towards the end of 2023. First came from Bank of America, who he had, been using for 40 plus years. And they, one day all of a sudden decided to close his bank account in September 2023 with no reason. They sent him a letter. He provided me with that letter. It just said, hey, we're going to close your accounts, prepare for that result. And then he called them and said, kind of what's up with this? And we were able to obtain that recording, which is in the story. And it's
Yes.
The Bank of America robotic voice telling him, it's our policy that we can't explain to you why we're closing our account.
In fact, let me play this audio. I want people to hear it. We do have it here. This is the Bank of America voicemail. John Eastman calling in for details, saying, what's going on with my account? And here's what he heard.
If you have recently received a letter stating your account or accounts are being closed, the reason for this is that Bank of America made a business decision to close the account, and or we have determined you're operating in a business type we have chosen not to service at Bank of America. It is a Bank of America policy that we do not provide any additional information regarding our decision to close an account, and the decision to close the account will not be reconsidered.
So it's final. We're closing your account. We're not telling you why. Chances are we don't want to do business with you. Goodbye.
Yep. And then when, you think maybe that's the end of it, he opens an account with USAA because he's, related to a veteran. And they then end up closing his account towards the end of November. Again, same thing with no explanation. He told me he inquired about it, didn't have a recording of the phone call, and got basically the same response that he got from Bank of America. So here he is with, no response from both of these banks. I was able to engage with Bank of America about this, and we gave them 2 days to kind of dig up some details on this. I figured this was a topic that they would maybe need to investigate a little bit on. They said immediately, hey, we'll get back to you with something. And then about an hour before that deadline, I got on the phone with one of their people from their comms department, and they told me, actually, we don't comment on clientele matters. And then USAA just never responded to me at all. I followed up with them 3 times and never got a response.
So they had no interest in getting back to you, or apparently had considered whether or not they'd respond to you, and they just decided to ignore you. They thought that was the best course of action here?
Yeah, I mean, that is how it appears, and that appears as what they did to Eastman as well. And he was, the account holder of 2 accounts.
And he's been trying to get answers, and he's got nothing else. Literally just that voicemail from Bank of America and that letter from USAA, and that's all he knows. So no one has outright declared to him that this was a political hit, but what does he suspect?
Yeah, I mean, he was 99% confident when I talked to him on the phone that this was because of politics. And I think that's understandable given how much he has endured since he gave Trump legal advice in the 2020, in wake of the 2020 election. Now they're moving to try to debar him in California. He's lost jobs and, fellowships over the advice that he gave. So this just seems to him to be this, another bump in the road, another example of the political persecution.
It really is amazing. This is not the first time Bank of America has done this before in their case. USAA was the one that surprised me. I didn't realize that if they're getting involved here politically, which it appears that they are, that was the first time I'd heard any indication of that. I say this as someone who's a military brat who for some time had USAA insurance myself. So I was very familiar with the company, and by the way, previously very happy with it. So troubled to hear their name raised in the news in this way. And so what are officials, people who study this for a living, saying? Are state attorneys general responding to all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there was, right before my story posted, actually, there was a coalition of about 11 GOP state attorney generals who petitioned to Bank of America and kind of called them out on their debanking tendencies. But I talked to some experts on the debanking, one from the Foundation of Government Accountability, who really had been sounding the alarm on this trend and just how concerning and how, it can really chill free speech for Americans, because what they're seeing from banking institutions is that they are closing accounts without any indication. And when sometimes if you press, there have been individuals or groups who have been able to maybe get a response that it had been some sort of political closing of the account. But if you're being told, if you have your account, your access to your finances is being closed without reason, and then you suspect in just the slightest reason that it's because of political leanings, you're totally going to be less likely to speak out about your political views or, express that. And because a lot of these Americans have families to feed, they have bills to pay. And so this is what these experts expressed to me, that they're very concerned about what these banks can do to Americans.
Yeah, that you can be excluded from the financial institutions of our country because your politics aren't correct. That you're judged to be a part of the wrong party. It's absurd. I mean, and of course, not only if banks like this make judgments about how you earn your money, presumably then they might turn around and make judgments about how you spend your money. Like if you're spending money in the wrong places, maybe you don't get to hold an account here. This seems like a dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, and I think it hasn't been really focused on a lot. That's one thing both of these experts kind of pointed out to me, is that, I asked if this was on the rise, and they had felt like it had been going on and that people had not been shedding light on, this new type of cancel culture, that they were very familiar with other individuals who had been debanked, and the media hadn't reported it. One thing I do want to point out, Vince, is that I think the response to the story, people who, like you pointed out, have been so surprised that USAA pulled this on John Eastman. I went to their latest Twitter post. It's from 24 hours ago, and there's 68 responses, and almost all of them are people freaking out that they closed the account. I have received emails from people who have been very upset and have been USAA account holders and have been upset to hear that Eastman's accounts were closed without any reasoning. And so I think that speaks to the nature that we don't really know about these debanking incidents yet, and that it's kind of been under the radar.
Yeah, for sure. And we've been hearing quite a bit here from people who've been saying the same thing. And when Josh Hammer raised it on the air, he was sourcing it originally to John Eastman's family, who had written a column for The Blaze a few weeks ago, indicating that he had been debanked by both Bank of America and USAA. And as soon as people started hearing that, they said, wait, is that real? Is that true? Because people do make decisions about where they keep their money on the basis of things like that. If they feel like their politics and their lives are being attacked, they don't want to support companies that are doing that. And it's hard to blame them.
Yeah, another thing that these experts pointed out to me is that they think when banks are making these decisions to close the account, they're doing it because they either think the client is high risk or they don't want to do business with them. But regardless, they say that there's no methodology behind this. There's no kind of reason that matches, traditional indicators, the way they would give you your credit score or something like that. They're just making this off of non-financial factors about you as an individual.
It's an amazing story. Reagan, thank you for digging into it. Lots of questions, and you produced quite a few answers for us, so we really appreciate this. Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Thank you so much today.
Thanks, Ben.
Good to chat with you. And as Reagan indicated, there is some attention being given to this by Republican prosecutors across the country. Republican attorneys general have sent a notice to Bank of America earlier this week, that was a day ago, for the debanking of conservatives. Fox News headline on this subject. They write, over a dozen Republican attorneys general are warning a major U.S. bank against alleged practices of debanking certain customers because of their religious or political views. In a letter obtained exclusively by Fox News Digital, Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach, along with 14 of his Republican colleagues, told Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan that the company, quote, appears to be conditioning access to its services on customers having the bank's preferred religious or political views. Your discriminatory behavior is a serious threat to free speech and religious freedom, is potentially illegal, and is causing political and regulatory backlash, the letter sent Monday states. Your bank needs to be transparent with us and assure us, its shareholders and others, that it will not continue to debank customers for their speech or religious exercise, the attorneys general wrote. Media relations representative Bill Halden denied the claims in a statement, saying, quote, religious beliefs are not a factor in any account closing decision. Quote, we are proud to provide banking services to nonprofit organizations affiliated with diverse faith communities throughout the United States. The attorneys general claimed that Bank of America has previously denied services to the following categories: gun manufacturers, distributors and sellers, fossil fuel producers, contractors for U.S. immigration and customs enforcement, and private prisons and related services. The letter cites recent news reports that the bank cooperated with the FBI and the U.S. Treasury to profile conservative and religious Americans as potential domestic terrorists. Kobach telling Fox News Digital, quote, Bank of America's practice of canceling the bank accounts of conservatives and even turning over information about customers' purchases to federal law enforcement undermines free speech, religious freedom, and the right to privacy. It's discriminatory and likely illegal. As state attorneys general, we will vigorously defend the constitutional rights of all Americans when they are threatened by big business. So this is a very much a growing fight where you already have these major financial institutions making what appear to be explicitly political decisions, banishing people on the basis of either their earnings or their purchases, and collaborating with the government in order to surveil them. Let's take a phone call. Bob, Silver Spring, line 1. Bob, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
How you doing?
Good, Bob.
I was telling you, Cole, you're talking about the banks and debanking people.
Yes.
You familiar with Jack London?
Jack London, the author, Call of the Wild, yes.
Uh-huh. He was a socialist, and he wrote a book about this kind of despotism back in like 1910 or so, called The Iron Heel. And one of the things they did to the people was to debank them. So he's only 100 years ahead of himself.
This is the way history works, isn't it? It just keeps repeating. So he wrote about this a century ago. I've never read this book, The Iron Heel. Jack London, the socialist, and he advocated for this. Is that the impression you got, that this is the way to handle the people you don't like politically, to debank them?
Oh yeah.
How about that? All right. Well, I'm gonna have to check that out, Bob.
Yeah, I was down here in the basement trying to find my copy. Of course, I can't find it now.
Yeah, well, we'll see how long you can find it anywhere. You know how these things work. The left not too big on keeping books that might give you perspective on your shelf. Thank you. All right.
The amazing thing though is, he's known for Alaska and all that stuff.
Yes.
Here he is. He wrote something like that.
Yeah, how about that? Well, thank you, Bob. That's a little reading recommendation, a little light reading to give you a sense of what's actually happening right now. There was apparently a playbook written by Jack London a long time ago. Thank you, Bob. The book called The Iron Heel. Lane, Scotch Plains, New Jersey, line 2 now. Lane, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. What's on your mind?
So, Vince, I've been around the banking business about 40 years.
Yeah.
I've been an examiner. I've been a bank CEO. And I'll tell you that when I have an account as a bank CEO, I don't want to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't have a lot of reasons to get rid of them other than people who are engaged in illegal activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you look at Mr. Eastman, it just smells like retaliation.
Yeah, for his legal advice. He gave legal advice to Trump. They hate it, so they've decided to join the mob and banish him. That's what it looks like.
Right. But it goes a little deeper than that, Vince. The Bank of America has been engaged in turning over data to this government, I believe, without subpoena. You might want to do a little homework on USAA.
Mm-hmm.
They've been in trouble with the OCC for 10 years. This could be a way to buy themselves a little latitude out of there.
Interesting.
If I were any of you have a minute for me?
Unfortunately, no. You're running up against it right now, Lane. I appreciate those. This is good insight. Call back, though. We'll be happy to take your excellent advice, because that is interesting.
I'm going to give you some remedies here, potentially, so I will.
Okay, please. Thank you, Lane. I appreciate that. No, fascinating. In other words, the government's already breathing down their neck. Maybe throwing John Eastman to the wolves is some red meat to back them down. Could be. 358.